Welcome to the Credit Union Sales and Marketing Podcast. Your hosts, Bill McKenna, Paul Robert, and special guests discuss ideas for creating alignment in your sales and marketing efforts and ways to accelerate growth. Now let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Credit Union Sales and Marketing Podcast. I'm Paul Robert with FI Strategies. My cohort there is Bill McKenna. Hey, Bill, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you today?
Terrific. Tell us quickly about your organization.
McKenna Marketing Network. I consider myself an orchestra conductor these days. Basically, I'm talking with CEOs and CFOs and all sorts of senior leadership in credit unions and helping them to figure out what they're struggling with and how we can help solve some of those problems. I've built a network of partners that allow me to help them with different issues, whether it's marketing, training, culture, like my partner is sitting right next to me on the other side of the podcast here. So that's what I'm doing these days.
If our listeners and viewers want to learn a little bit more about who we are and then why we're doing this, our first episode was kind of an introduction. So if you get a few minutes, go back and click on that pod and find out about a little bit more about who we are and why we're doing this podcast. But today, Bill, we're going to dig into something that's near and dear to both of our hearts, and that's branding, and really the critical role that branding plays in the present success of credit unions, but I would argue is really critical for future success. What do you think about that?
Totally agree with you. It's a conversation that I feel like I have continually with credit unions. They're saying, how do we stand out? What makes us different? We talk about brand and all that. And you and I both, in many of the conferences that we've spoken at or with our clients almost every week, that issue comes up when we discuss it. So I think it's a critical thing to discuss, which really makes me think about the many different aspects of branding. It's more than just a visual piece, right? It's not just one thing. There's so much to this. And so, Paul, when you talk about branding with clients, what are some of the things that you tend to share with them?
Well, differentiation. I mean, that to me, when I talk about this being more important in the future than it is today or has been in the past, that's really what I'm referring to, Bill, is how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? It used to be when you and I were working in the trade, your competitor you could see down the street, right? It was that bank or maybe a credit union, but more often a bank or savings and loan down on the street corner. Well, that ain't the case anymore. You can't see your competition. And furthermore, your members and maybe more importantly, your prospective members aren't necessarily looking for that. They're looking for what's on their phone, what's online. They're looking for who they saw on TV last night or heard on another podcast. So the competition today is fierce, and it's only going to get tougher. And so the challenge for credit unions is how do we stand out? Now, it's not insurmountable. And in fact, I think we're going to argue that if you've got a strong brand, it really puts you in a good place. But really got to be aware of your identity and who you are, what you stand for, how do you promote that, and then use that as your differentiation.
Here's just a quick shout out to our sponsor, ironistic.com. Hey, in today's world, everyone knows the importance of having a great website and having an integrated digital marketing plan. If your credit union, community bank, or any other company is looking for that help, I can highly recommend ironistic.com. Check them out.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's something that over the years, I've been doing this for an awful long time. It's something that worked with lots of clients on. And honestly, I think the question always comes up, when's a good time to brand? Like, when should we think about rebranding? And that rebranding term, again, could mean different things to different people. Sometimes they think about branding. Many times, again, they think about a visual brand. It's so much more than that. And going back through the history of some of the clients I've worked with over the years, I use an example. At one point, I was involved with the League of IBM Credit Unions. And at that time, there was, I believe the number was 37 IBM credit unions. 37 of them. And, based on different locations in the country, right? Different sizes. And some of them still today are some of the biggest credit unions in the industry. For instance, one up at Endicott, New York, which was one of the main IBM locations, is Vision's Federal Credit Union, right? So they've changed their names. They've adjusted because they felt like sometimes that brand they had, that name, what they were doing in their community, whatever, it was not going to allow them to grow. And I think, don't you think, Paul, that's one of the things we hear often where people are going, I feel like our name is an obstacle, or I feel like our visual brand is an obstacle. It's keeping people from joining us. We're so-and-so teachers credit union, and no one from the community is going to say, why should I join a teachers credit union? Don't we see that a lot?
Absolutely. It's holding them back. And, we're not here to pick on anybody, but sometimes, Bill, what's holding them back is the board's reluctance to change or resistance to change. And the reason I thought of that is when you talked about the teachers credit union as an example, what makes up their board? Who's on their board? Probably a lot of teachers, right? If not all teachers, many of them are teachers. They don't want to give that up. And you can't blame them. And they've put a lot into the credit union, no question. And we tremendously appreciate their volunteerism over the years. But times have changed. And being a teacher's credit union is limiting. And when we think about being able to grow and attract new and different members, a name like that is going to hamstring you, no question about it. Another thing about rebranding, Bill, that I thought of when you were talking there was, it doesn't have to be a total overhaul, does it? I mean, sometimes it's just a tweak or a modification. I'm thinking of one credit union who's a client of ours on Long Island. They simply dropped the word federal from their name. They went to just credit union instead of federal credit union because what they found through their research was that the word federal was limiting, that people thought that, I have to be a federal employee in order to be a member of this credit union. So it doesn't have to be a total transformation in order to be effective. Agree?
Yeah, totally agree. And this is something that I've dealt with for years. So actually having done, I'm going to guess it's 35 name changes with credit unions over the years and rebranding and all of those pieces with it, which you and I have worked on some of those actually.
Yeah, right.
But having done that, I actually kind of established this, what I call 7 steps of branding. And over the next bunch of episodes, as we've discussed, we're going to talk about some of these steps or these stages or these phases of branding and what they are and how you need to think about it. Because I really think that when it comes to brand, it's essential that everyone's on the same page. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So, one of my favorite quotes is when you talk about branding, there are a lot of opinions of branding, what it is. Some people you talked about branding, they have one idea of what that is, another. And I don't think there's necessarily one totally correct way to talk about branding, but I do believe that there are some things that are basic. I love this quote from Jeff Bezos. It says, a brand is what people say about you when you are not in the room.
Yeah.
Right. Let me say it again. Good. A brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Isn't that true?
Absolutely, it is. Say about you, think about you, tell their friends about you. No question. Yeah, that's great. I love that.
And another quote I had seen was something about it's an emotional reaction to the company, its services, or its merchandise. In other words, our brand is built through every interaction with a particular credit union or company. We build that reference to who they are, the brand in our minds of who they are. What were you going to say, Paul?
I want to hone in on the word emotional, because I think that's another instance, Bill, of where times are changing. Today's consumer, and also let's throw this into the conversation too. Today's employee wants to do business with a company where they have some kind of emotional connection to it. All right. If I'm starting from scratch and I'm picking a car manufacturer, a computer maker, a financial institution, ideally, I want to have an emotional connection to that organization. And if their brand is old and stale and emotionless, well, I've got an uphill battle if I want to get that person as a customer or a member. So I really like the use of the word emotional there because I think that's more critical today than it's ever been.
You got that right. And there is a lot of emotional things connected to the history of the credit union you're part of.
Yeah, right.
What company you worked for, or what community you live in. And those references you have many times to that credit union are based on some of those other things that really had nothing to do with the credit union itself. But you've built perceptions.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
step
it's
on
okay.
your toes there.
We'll learn to do this better. We're still learning, right?
Hey, we're both sales guys. We want the mic, you know?
Yeah, we want to talk.
Right. But I think that goes back to what we were saying about 5 minutes ago about the teachers credit union. And there are other examples, but let's stick with that one for a minute. You know, just because we change our name doesn't mean we lose our heritage. And so if we do change our brand away from using the word teachers or even referencing teachers, that doesn't mean we can't talk about our history and be proud of the fact that for 50, 70, 100 years, we were a teachers credit union. But now we're different. Now we're changing, we're evolving, we're growing, et cetera, et cetera. So
Exactly.
It doesn't mean just because we change our brand that we change or lose our heritage. In fact, we can continue to leverage that as we move forward.
Without a question, the heritage of a credit union should not have to be abandoned. It's a matter of fact, it's built upon what the future is for them. But what we're trying to do is open new opportunities. And I think I'll just use an example here real quickly. So I worked with a client down in Florida years ago now, and they were a Boeing credit union. So they came out of Boeing. And I believe at the time that name was Florida Aircraft Federal Credit Union, I believe was what it was called. It's been a while, but I believe that was it. And we helped rename them as Velocity Federal Credit Union. So we knew it was about flying. We knew it was about aviation. And the word velocity is critical in aviation, right? You have to have velocity to take your airplane off. So it was directly related, but yet the word velocity gave a little bit more of a getting the Boeing name out of it allowed more people to think they might be able to be members of that credit union. And I'm sure you've seen many similar situations.
And another thing that's similar, that's a byproduct of that, Bill, is, you know, it raises curiosity. So when I hear velocity, you know, I can think of a couple different things. Certainly air flight is one of them. But anyway, I would want to maybe inquire, hey, what does that mean? Why are you guys called Velocity, you know? Or conversely, employees, the credit union as a whole, through its marketing efforts, should be promoting the fact that here's why we're Velocity. This is what the name means to us. This is what it means to our community. Here's what it can mean to you. That's a source of pride that we should be talking about. So,
and creating a story around that, right? Creating a story
yeah.
about that, and that's what we do. So, Paul, let's move into some of the components of a brand for a second, because it's more than just, again, is it visual? So let's just talk about those. So the first one I'm going to talk about is image. So I see 4 components to brand. First one is image, how people perceive your brand. And I use the illustration of a brand refresh. Many times you see companies all over that just change their logo or change their colors or come up with a new theme. That's what I call a visual brand. And that really does affect your image, right? I use this illustration. You drive down the street in your neighborhood, and all of a sudden someone resides their house. All of a sudden you're driving, ooh, look at that.
Yeah.
It really stands out, right? It looks different. So it creates a visual appearance of brand. So I consider that the first component.
And sometimes, and we've had credit unions that do this, Bill, they just change their color, as you allude to. But there again, there's a story behind that color. You know, this color represents this certain element of our community or of our geographic area and so forth. Maybe we move away from a previous color or a previous image because it no longer represents the area. So yeah, image is a big part of it. Now, a second component of the brand is positioning, right? And to me, that is what makes you stand out. What is it that is distinctive about your brand, whether that's the name, the color, the logo, or all of the above? But I think that's part of it too, Bill, is some kind of differentiation, some kind of attention getter, if you will, when it comes to positioning.
Yeah, I agree. So what's the third one?
It sets a promise or establishes a promise, and that leads to an expectation. And here's another one, by the way, that applies to employees as well as members and prospective members. But, what do they expect of your brand? What should they expect of your brand? Or maybe another way to look at it is, what are we prepared to deliver? What's a priority of ours that we're going to focus on delivering as we move forward? So I think that brand promise is a really critical component of it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you work very deeply with credit unions. You're involved very much in trying to build out those, because that promise has to be really understood by everyone, right? They have to understand what that truly means, and how do they deliver that every day? I know, Paul, in your work with credit unions, you dig deep into that and making sure that you build it out and make sure people understand what that really, really means and how they deliver it.
We do, and I'll go back to the word emotion. It's got to be from the heart. Can't just be words on a wall. It's got to be something that each employee believes and lives. And so that's a big part of it too, Bill, is talking about, all right, what does this mean to each employee in the organization? How are you going to live this day in and day out? Even your back office employees, your support staff, how do they support their teammates so that we live the brand? And that's a critical, piece of it as well.
Yeah.
I grew up in an environment, I think you did too, where we were all about sales, right? We were all about product features and benefits. And how do you talk to members or prospective members about that? The secret to success today and going forward is talking about your brand and talking about how you're going to, what your promise is and how you're going to substantiate that promise going forward. Do you concur with that?
I do. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. And so the last one out of the four is equity, your brand's equity. So every brand, every company, every organization has equity in their brand. That equity could be good or bad, but the truth is there is equity. And that is one of the biggest things that credit unions must consider when they're thinking about changing their name or changing their brand. What is the equity in our brand, and how much value does that have? Is it going to hurt us if we change it, or is it going to help us? And I think that has a lot to do with the employer group that you're involved with, the field of membership. But there is a lot to consider. This isn't something that should be taken lightly. And as a matter of fact, when we move into the next episode, we'll talk a little about the research that goes into deciding whether you want to change your brand or not. You can't just, this isn't something, hey guys, let's change our brand. We have to really consider what's involved and how it's going to positively impact or negatively potentially impact us.
All right, good. That's a good teaser for the next one, because I know that's top of mind for a lot of credit unions, is what's the risk, if you will, from a financial standpoint in changing the brand.
Yep.
Hey, let's move on to the benefits of changing your brand, and particularly as it relates to the community and so forth. Bill, what do you see as some of the benefits to having a really strong brand?
I would say there's a number of them. One is greater member loyalty. We know that when someone really supports us and loves us, they become advocates for our brand. They want to tell other people about us, right? So that would be one. Member loyalty is so important, and we want deeper member loyalty. I'd say the second one would be increased use of services, deeper relationships. In other words, if someone wants what we really want from all of our members is more use of the services. We want more market share, right? And wallet share. So we want that. Greater profitability, because if we have them using more of our services, well, naturally, we're going to have more profitability because of the amount that they use it. Sustainable competitive advantage. What makes us different? Why are our products better? Why would they choose us? And it's not just rates and fees. By no means is it rates and fees.
Way. And it shouldn't be.
No, exactly. The last one I sort of mentioned, creation of brand advocates. When someone loves your brand, they talk about you. They tell other people. They share information. So those are a few of the benefits. Thoughts on any of those, Paul, regarding the benefits of a strong brand?
Yeah, I'll first of all repeat myself. I think it's setting the expectation is really critical. And you talked, Bill, about how we work with the staff. We actually want them to use the term, here's what you can expect from us. And I think that's, really powerful and a great approach. It also creates, Bill, consistency, or helps create consistency, and so if you've got a credit union that has a big footprint or is going into new markets, we've got to have consistency. And so changing or refreshing that brand is a great way of creating that consistency and bringing maybe disparate cultures together to create one culture at the organization. And then the last one, again, I keep coming back to the internal, but it really can be motivating, Bill. If you've got a staff of employees that maybe they're lethargic or they've plateaued, in terms of their performance and production, certainly, this is something that can revitalize them. It can really stimulate a positive performance going forward. So I think there's a lot of benefits to both the members and the employees when we talk about refreshing our brand.
Yeah, I totally agree. So this has been great today. Any other thoughts you want to add to this before we close out this session? Like I mentioned, next time we'll jump into a few more details. We're going to go through 7 steps of branding, which I think you're going to find very interesting on the next a bunch of sessions. And we're also looking forward to having a couple of guests on a couple of the sessions coming up very soon, because we certainly want this podcast to be something that has great value. We believe that there's a lot of people in this industry that have done some amazing things, both credit unions, partners, and people we work with. And we'd like to share some of those perspectives on the topics we discuss.
Well, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And so if we can introduce credit unions to organizations that have already done it and done it successfully, and we can use them as a model, can also be comforting or assuring that, okay, we can do this. And as we said at the outset, Bill, we need to do it. We need to make sure that our brand is as strong as it can be so that we can continue to grow and thrive into the future.
Absolutely. And that's what this is all about, right? We know that this industry continues to consolidate. We need to find ways to thrive and build for the future. And credit unions that are serious about that have a great future ahead of them. And that's what we're talking about here, is how we help them just be successful and move on into the future.
Great stuff, Bill. Great seeing you again. And thank you for this opportunity. If our viewers and our listeners have thoughts, comments, suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. So drop us a line and let us know what we can be doing bigger, better, and different going forward.